Dear dreamer, welcome to Dream Pedlar. Tonight we journey to Supta, a snow-veiled village nestled at the edge of Kalpanon's ancient dream winds. Here, where moonbell petals shimmer under starlit skies, the dream wanderers arrive, their vibrant wagons carrying secrets older than the stars. But something stirs beneath the quiet. Dreams unravel, totems fracture, and whispers of the sleeping star ripple through the night. Here Zarvi, the dream peddler, must uncover the truth before the delicate balance of waking and dreaming unravels. Close your eyes, dear dreamer, and step softly into this twilight world. Let the music of the harpist guide you, the poet's words enchant you, and the courage of dreamers light your way. Supta awaits, where every breath carries the weight of a wish, and every step brings you closer to the heart of a dream. It was that time of the year in Kalpanon when winter unfurled like a whispered promise. Snow fell not in hurried flurries, but in a gentle, measured cadence, as though the sky was dreaming. In Supta, where the first dream song had been raised, the keeper of hope returned carrying the dream winds. The season carried with it a soft reverence. The village lay quiet beneath the thick white quilt, its thatched roofs crowned with frost that shimmered under the blue glow of moonbell flowers swaying at the edge of the forest. The air was crisp with the scent of pine and faint traces of dream dust, a perfume unique to this place, lingering in the way an old melody lingers long after its final note. The villagers walk slowly this time of year, savoring the crunch of snow beneath their boots, their breaths forming soft clouds in the cold. Every corner of Supta seemed alive, for the Dream Wanderers Caravan had arrived. The Dream Wanderers were known across Kalpanon for their nomadic ways, trailing the winds of forgotten songs and long-lost dreams. Their wagons were a riot of color, deep purples, emerald greens, and golds that shone even under the muted winter light. Painted with symbols of their wandering lineage, spirals for change, stars for direction, and crescent moons for dreams, the wagons were as much storytellers as the people they carried. The air was filled with soft music, laughter, and the gentle murmur of conversations. The wanderers, wrapped in furs and cloaks, moved with the ease of people accustomed to winters harsher than Supta's gentle snow. Their voices carried accents shaped by the farthest edges of Kalpanon, adding to their mystique. They had unpacked their wares, small charms carved from river stones, trinkets laced with poetry, and jars of shadow glass said to hold fleeting dreams caught on moonlit nights. A small crowd had gathered around one of the most popular stalls, where a dream flower tea vendor was preparing steaming cups of fragrant brews. Behind her, jars lined her table, filled with petals that shimmered as if it was holding the memory of moonlight. Calm dreams or curious ones? She asked a stellar folk artisan who stood with her hands clasped in front of her. Curious, the woman replied, her voice low. I've been restless lately. The vendor nodded knowingly and selected a pinch of golden petals, blending them with crushed starlight sugar. As the tea steeped, the scent wafted through the air, light and sweet, with a spicy undertone. Further along the square, near the glow of the lanterns, sat the dream poem calligrapher and the dream harpist, their crafts intertwined. The calligrapher worked with a quiet intensity, his quill dipping into ink made from crushed starlight. Each stroke of his pen seemed to shimmer as it dried, forming verses that captured fragments of the dreamer's essence. His parchment was adorned not with ordinary writing, but a flowing, luminous script. It was said to be a language older than Kalpanon, one that spoke directly to the soul. Beside him, the dream harpist played a melody that seemed to rise and fall, with the rhythm of the calligrapher's hand. Her harp, carved from moonbell wood and strung with threads of light, resonated with a sound both tender and otherworldly. Each note wove into the words the calligrapher inscribed, as if the two crafts were inseparable. Some believed the harp's song gave the ink its glow, while others thought the calligrapher's words guided the melody. The villagers sat entranced, their faces bathed in the soft light of the harpist's lantern. When the calligrapher handed a finished piece of parchment to a young girl, the script shimmered. The letters hummed a melody that seemed to echo in her chest. "Do you hear it?" she whispered to her mother. Her mother smiled, as if the words needed no explanation. One villager, a quiet man with tired eyes, approached the harpist and calligrapher together. He offered them a question he could not bring himself to voice. The harpist played a gentle refrain, her fingers brushing the strings as though coaxing something hidden. The calligrapher began to write, his strokes deliberate, the ink glowing faintly in the winter light. When the man received the parchment, he clutched it close, his expression softened by something no one else could see. One stall sold woven shawls that shimmered as though threads of dream light were stitched into the fabric. Dream lanterns made from fireflies imbued with dream dust, flickered with shifting patterns of color that seemed to tell stories of their own. A dream mirror seller sold mirrors, small and round, with edges carved from dream metal. Villagers stared into their shifting surfaces, catching glimpses of forgotten dreams or fragments of wishes left behind in the folds of their memory. A seller, who called himself a dream whisperer, sold bottled whispers, tiny glass vials that, when uncorked, released a hushed sound of dream wind. The sound was soft, haunting yet familiar. The wanderers were as captivating as their wares. They moved among their customers with grace and warmth, their laughter ringing like bells. Yet here and there, one might notice a quiet intensity behind their eyes, a hint of the dreams they carried and the places they'd been. By twilight, nearly everyone in Supta had gathered in the square. Burjan, the baker, leaned against a lamp-post with a steaming cup of courage brew, his cheeks red from the cold. Besides him, Marin, the dreamsmith in his heavy traveling coat, its worn edges still dusted with wood and dream metal shavings from his workshop, sat bantering with Burjan. They waved at Zarvi as she passed. Zarvi smiled back, her breath clouding in the frosty air. Zarvi's anklets made from dream metal chimed softly with each step, its sound blended with the music drifting from the center of the market. "Bozan looks mightier than he should," Zarvi said, her eyes glinting with mischief. "He's likely had more than one cup of that courage brew," Marin replied, his grin widening. "This place feels fuller," Zarvi said after a moment, her voice warm but thoughtful. "The winds, the people, even the forest, they've settled, haven't they?" "They've remembered themselves," Burjan replied. Zarvi glanced at the snow-draped trees lining the square, where mist had begun to curl among the trunks like a shy creature. "Dreams are calmer now, more willing to stay," added Marin. Zarvi sipped her tea, her favorite festive wonder brew, a blend of peppermint, moonbell petal essence, and crushed vanilla star pods, with a swirl of shimmering cinnamon dust and a hint of hearthberry syrup. The warmth spread through her chest as the frosted lavender crystals dissolved on her tongue, leaving a floral, wintry sweetness. The brew felt like a dream, a taste of the season that lingered as she moved through the square, weaving between villagers and wanderers. Children darted between stalls, their laughter bright as they chased dream motes, tiny, flickering bursts of light that danced just out of reach, teasing the edges of their vision. The older villagers lingered by the colorful wagons, haggling cheerfully for trinkets or sipping their own steaming cups of dream flower-infused blends. The warmth of the market wrapped around them all like a shared blanket, softening even the coldest hearts and making the night feel brighter. At the far edge of the market, nestled beneath a canopy adorned with dried flowers and tinkling wind chimes, sat Ariel, the dream palm reader. Her presence was as much a part of the Dream Wanderers Caravan as the glow of their lanterns or the melody of the harpist. She seemed carved from the season, her silvery hair falling in loose waves like winter streams, her lavender shawl catching the faint light with a softness that mirrored the snow. Villagers approached her stall tentatively, drawn by the quiet magnetism of her craft. They left clutching charms or whispers of her counsel, their steps lighter, as though she had lifted some unseen weight. At that moment, Ariel was holding the hand of a young villager whose nervous laughter mingled with the faint chime of wind-caught bells. "Dreams are like rivers," Ariel was saying, her voice lilting, musical. "Some flow gently, some rush like storms, but all of them carry you somewhere, even when you don't know the destination." Her fingers glided over the villager's palm, tracing the lines with a precision that seemed born of something far older than her years. Her expression softened as she paused. "This worry you carry," she murmured, "it isn't yours. Let it drift away. It belongs to a current you do not need to follow." The villager's face softened as well, their breath catching as though a knot had loosened. Ariel pressed a small charm into their hand, a simple token said to hold the essence of a peaceful dream, and sent them on their way with a reassuring smile. As the villager turned to go, Ariel's sharp gaze flicked toward the movement of anklets chiming softly in the snow. "Zarvi," she called, her tone warm, a melodic pull that blended effortlessly with the music of the market. She waved the younger woman over, her smile bright with a touch of mischief. "Come here, my dear. You've been avoiding me, haven't you?" "I could never avoid you, Ariel." Zarvi smiled as she stepped closer. The scents of lavender and dried dream flowers wafted from the stall, mingling with the faint sweetness of roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor. "You're just always surrounded by admirers." Ariel laughed lightly. "They come to hear what they already know, hoping it sounds better when I say it," she quipped, gesturing for Zarvi to sit on the small wooden stool across from her. "And you, Zarvi? Surely you don't need me to read your dreams?" Zarvi lowered herself into the seat, cradling her warm, festive brew between her hands. "I thought I'd stop by while wandering," she said, her voice thoughtful. "The market feels livelier tonight. Everyone seems lighter somehow." Ariel's expression softened as she leaned forward, resting her elbows lightly on the table. "Supta has been waiting for this," she said, her words carrying the weight of the moment. "Dreams grow richer when shared. And these people, they've been starved for connection. The market reminds them what it feels like to hold a little wonder in their hands." Her gaze lingered on Zarvi for a moment, before another villager approached the stall hesitantly. Ariel offered them her usual bright smile, gesturing for Zarvi to rise. "Go on, my dear," she said playfully, tilting her head. Their conversation was interrupted by a villager approaching the stall. Ariel noticed them and gave a quick, reassuring smile before glancing back at Zarvi. "We'll talk again soon, yes? And," she added with a playful tilt of her head, "come back when you need answers. I'm always here." Zarvi smiled in return, rising and stepping away with a nod. As she drifted back into the bustling square, she could still feel the warmth of Ariel's presence, a quiet steadiness that wrapped around her like the first sip of her festive brew. Behind her, the villager took their place, offering their palm to Ariel, as her melodic voice softened into the cadence of another unfolding story. The square had grown brighter as the lanterns cast their golden glow over the snow-covered cobblestones. Dream wanderers moved with practiced ease, tucking their wares into the folds of their stalls and sharing murmured laughter that lingered in the air like the harpist's melody. Zarvi paused by the dream lantern stall, their flickering light catching her gaze. The lanterns told their own stories, their colors shifting in soft patterns that felt like whispers just beyond comprehension. As she wandered further, the music of the market seemed to shift, softening into a melody that was both wistful and warm. It wrapped itself around her as she passed the dream harpist and the calligrapher, who continued their shared craft as though time moved differently in their corner of the square. When Zarvi reached the edge of the market, the bustle faded into the quiet hush of Supta at night. Snow fell heavier now, muffling the world as it drifted in thick flakes. She glanced back once, the glow of the market dimmed by distance, but no less vibrant in its spirit. The dream winds blew gently, carrying with them the songs of the wanderers, the whispers of dreams, and the promise of nights yet to unfold. Morning broke slowly over Supta, the sky a pale silver that hinted at sunlight but held onto the chill of winter. Zarvi sat in her garden, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of her favorite morning brew, an earthy mix of dried lavender, dream honey, and a pinch of moonglow powder. The snow-covered garden stretched before her, the frost-laden branches of her moonbell vines catching the faint light like delicate crystal. This was her ritual, a moment of stillness before the day unfolded. She laid a small spindle and her dream threads on the table beside her. With careful, practiced hands, she began weaving the threads together, her breath steady as she murmured a quiet dream invocation, woven from the melody of the first dream song and the soft rustle of the winter winds of Supta. The threads, infused with dream dust, shimmered faintly in the morning light, catching the essence of the air around her. As the threads wove into a delicate pattern, Zarvi closed her eyes and listened. She wasn't searching for anything specific, just letting the world speak as it would. The dream winds were calm, carrying no trace of nightmares or restless echoes. Yet, there was a faint ripple in the quiet, like a misplaced note in a familiar melody. Her hand stilled on the spindle. "What are you hiding?" she murmured to the threads. There was no answer. Zarvi sighed, tucking the threads away. She rose from her seat, the morning air crisp against her cheeks, and made her way to her workshop. Inside her cozy workshop, Zarvi worked with quiet focus, her fingers weaving silver threads of moonbell essence into a small vial of dream dust. The air around her smelled of crushed petals and faint traces of starlight. She paused, holding the vial up to the light that streamed through the frosted window. The soft glow within shimmered, the dream essence swirling gently. Each vial held a fragment of someone's hopes, worries, or longings, a piece of their sleeping self, captured and woven into clarity. The faint jingling of her anklets broke the silence as she moved to her shelf, placing the finished vial alongside others. Dreams of courage, dreams of love, dreams of solace. The market would soon come alive again, but for now the village felt suspended in a kind of wintry peace. That was when she heard the familiar creak of the door. The chime of the bell above her workshop door broke the morning quiet. Zarvi looked up from her table, where vials of dream essence glimmered softly in the light. Marin and an elderly man stood in the doorway, their coats heavy with snowflakes that melted into dark spots along the fabric. Their expressions serious and hands stuffed into the pockets as though they were trying to keep them steady. "Marin, Tiro, what brings you here so early in the morning?" Zarvi greeted, her voice light with surprise. Marin shook his head, stepping inside with Tiro. He glanced around the workshop at the softly glowing vials, the tools neatly arranged on the table. But his gaze seemed distant. "I need your help," he said finally. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, intricately carved totem. It was shaped like entwined wings, one of Marin's more delicate designs, made from moonbell wood and dream metal recently for Tiro. Normally, such a piece would hum faintly with the essence of the dream it held, a soft pulse of light that spoke to its purpose. But this one was dull, its glow extinguished. "Tiro brought this to me yesterday," Marin explained, setting the totem on Zarvi's work table. "He says it doesn't feel like his anymore, that something's wrong." Zarvi took the totem, her fingers brushing its smooth surface. Even before she looked deeper, she could feel it. Something was off. The totem was heavy in her hands, but its essence was faint, as though it had been drained and replaced with something fractured. "What have you dreamed lately, Tiro?" Zarvi asked gently, stepping closer. Her voice, calm and low, had a way of softening even the sharpest edges of worry. Tiro hesitated. "I dream of my garden, as I always do, but lately it feels strange, as if it isn't mine. I see it, but it's all wrong. The flowers are not the ones I planted. The paths lead nowhere." He shook his head, his eyes clouded with confusion. "It's as if I'm walking through someone else's dream." Marin took the totem, his calloused hands cradling the piece with familiarity. He whispered the Smith whisper, a sacred mantra passed down through generations of dreamsmiths. The totem should have glowed faintly in response, a soft pulse of the dream essence within. Instead, it flickered weakly, its light faint and uneven, like a star losing its place in the sky. He passed the totem to Zarvi. She held the totem closer to her face and closed her eyes, and murmured a soft chant, her breath catching faint traces of the dream essence still clinging to the wood. It was fragmented, a mix of faint familiarity and something alien, distant and restless. "It's like someone tried to rewrite it," Zarvi said finally, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Marine, you said this happened with other villagers?" He nodded. "3 more came to me this morning. All of them said their totems felt wrong. Some can't remember their dreams at all. Others say the dreams they're having aren't theirs." Zarvi set the totem down carefully, her mind racing. Totems don't just change on their own. And even if one were tampered with, it shouldn't feel like this. She paused. "I don't know how that's even possible," Marin said, his voice tight. "But it doesn't feel like my work anymore. And the villagers, they're not themselves. It's subtle, but it's there, like their dream has been fogged." A quiet unease settled between them, the weight of Marin's words pressing against the calm of the workshop. Zarvi leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Marin brought more tampered totems, and they spent the rest of the morning examining the affected totem. Zarvi worked with the vials of dream dust she had infused into the designs, tracing the faint residues of altered essence. Each one carried the same disruption, an intrusion that didn't belong. By the time the morning light had shifted to the cool silver of midday, the totems remained a mystery, their altered essence a quiet warning that something had begun to stir within Supta's dream winds. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the market was alive with light and sound once more. Lanterns cast their golden glow over the snow-dusted square, and the smell of spiced tea and baked goods filled the air. The dream wanderers moved among the villagers with their usual grace, their colorful wagons standing out like constellations against the darkening sky. But to Marin and Zarvi, the energy seemed off. Not in any overt way, but there was tension, subtle yet unshakable. As they wandered past the vibrant stalls, Zarvi sipped her evening brew, her anklets chiming softly with each step. Marin walked beside her, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, his expression distant as he scanned the crowd. The villagers moved through the square with the same cheer as before, yet here and there cracks began to show. At the Dream Flower tea stall, a cluster of townsfolk lingered longer than usual. One villager, a woman wrapped tightly in a woolen shawl, leaned across the counter, her voice low but urgent. "Something stronger," she was saying to the vendor. "I need something that brings clarity. My dreams have been muddled." The vendor nodded sympathetically, scooping a mix of silver petals and crushed starlight into a steaming cup. As she handed it over, she had a trace of concern that she tried to mask with a smile. Zarvi exchanged a glance with Marin. "She's not the first," she murmured, her voice low enough to blend with the surrounding chatter. "I've seen 3 others asking for teas to calm their thoughts tonight." Marin didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on another scene just ahead. By the dream mirror stall, a villager stood frozen, staring into the shimmering surface of the small round mirror in their hands. Their expression shifted. Confusion, then something close to fear. The vendor reached out, gently taking the mirror from them and murmuring reassurances. But the villagers shook their head, stepping back as though the reflection had unsettled them deeply. "Do you see that?" Marin asked, his voice low. Zarvi nodded, her chest tightening. "It's like they're looking into someone else's dream." They moved on, their steps slower now, their senses attuned to the subtle shifts around them. At the edge of the market, they saw another villager, this one hovering uncertainly near the dream whisperer. They picked up a vial, uncorking it hesitantly. The whisper it released, a faint ghostly sound, seemed to leave them even more unsettled than before. "It's not just Thero," Zarvi said quietly, her fingers tightening around her cup. "Whatever's happening, it's spreading." The weight of the fractured totems hung heavy between them, not in their hands but in the air, like an unspoken question begging for answers. Ariel's stall stood as it always had, adorned with dried flowers and shimmering fragments of the past. The dream palm reader was once again at work, her silver hair catching the glow of the lanterns. A villager sat before her, their hand outstretched, but their face was tight with unease. Ariel's voice was calm, soothing, though there was something sharper in her gaze as she studied the lines of their palm. Marin and Zarvi approached cautiously, their steps slowing as they caught snippets of Ariel's words. "Dreams don't lie," she was saying softly, "but they can be bent, twisted. This line here, it's still yours, but it carries the weight of another. You'll find your way back, but you must be patient." The villager nodded, though their expression didn't lighten. They rose and left the stall, clutching a small token Ariel had pressed into their hand. As they passed Zarvi and Marin, the two exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between them. Ariel's face brightened with a warm smile on seeing Zarvi and Marin. "Ah, Zarvi," You look like you've been carrying the weight of the moon tonight. Come sit. Tell me what's on your mind. Or don't. And let me guess. Zarvi hesitated, glancing at Marin before taking a seat on the low wooden bench beside the stall. Marin remained standing, his gaze fixed on the edge of the canopy as though lost in thought. We've noticed something, Zarvi began slowly. Something off. Thero's dreams, the villagers. They're not right. Their totems, their reflections, even the whispers. It's as if their dreams are being tampered with. Ariel's hand stilled as she folded a lavender shawl over her lap. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered with recognition. Perhaps, or with caution. Dreams are delicate things, she said after a moment. It doesn't take much to unsettle them. But this feels deliberate. It's not just unease, it's intrusion, alteration. The totems are breaking, Zarvi pressed. And the villagers, they feel like they're losing themselves. Thero's dreams weren't his. Others speak of restless nights, of fragments that don't fit. Ariel tilted her head, her gaze sharpening as she studied Zarvi and Marin. You've been in the market long enough to know the Dream Wanderers' craft, she said lightly. You trust them, don't you? Marin frowned, his arms crossing over his chest. Of course we do. But this isn't about trust. It's about, stories, Ariel interrupted, her tone soft but insistent. Do you know the stories of the Wanderers, Zarvi? Zarvi blinked, caught off guard by the question. Their lineage? Yes, they've always been keepers of dreams, storytellers, artisans. Ariel let out a long breath, her fingers brushing the edge of her table as though tracing unseen lines. You must understand, Zarvi, that the Dream Wanderers have always walked the fine thread between waking and dreaming. We were once guardians of the dream winds, carrying their whispers across Kalpanon. Totems, like those you weave and mar in shapes, are our greatest gift, anchors to keep dreams tethered to those who dream them. She paused, her gaze meeting Zarvi's with quiet intensity. But there were those among us who sought more. They were called dream shifters, people who could not only weave dreams but rewrite them. It began with good intentions, shifting nightmares into gentler forms, untangling fears. But power has its own song, and not all who hear it resist its call. Zarvi's breath caught. The term felt distant, almost mythical, yet Ariel spoke it with quiet certainty. Dream shifters, she repeated. That's impossible. Their art was forbidden, wasn't it? The word sent a ripple through the quiet air like the faint chime of a bell too distant to place. Ariel sat back, her expression softening once more. Come to me when you want answers, she said with a small, knowing smile. I'm always here. Evening draped Supta in its silken shadows, the lanterns of the market shimmering like stars caught between snowflakes. Zarvi and Marin wandered together, their steps unhurried, their senses attuned to the subtleties of the night. As they continued past the colorful wagons, the music of the market mingled with the scent of spiced tea and moonbell petals. Then their steps slowed before the dream poem calligrapher and the dream harpist. Together they occupied a wagon stall that lacked the flourish of decoration but emanated an almost magnetic pull. The simplicity of their space, the poet's parchment and the harpist's carved wooden stool, was imbued with quiet elegance, their crafts intertwined like threads of an ancient melody. The dream poet, as he was known, sat behind the table, his posture serene, his quill poised above a sheet of parchment. The ink he used shimmered faintly, a soft, ethereal glow that seemed almost alive. Beside him, the harpist plucked her strings with deliberate care, her melody threading through the poet's strokes as if guiding them. Her harp, carved from moonbell wood and strung with what seemed to be threads of light, produced notes so gentle they felt like whispers of a forgotten language. Each sound wove into the space between the poet's words, lending the air an almost tangible harmony. The poet listened intently to a townsfolk seated across from him, their whispered words carrying fragments of their dream. The harpist's melody shifted subtly with each phrase, as though responding to the unseen emotions woven into the dream. The poet's quill moved in fluid strokes, tracing their story into the parchment with an artistry that felt as much like invocation as writing. When the villagers stood to leave, parchment in hand, their expression was a peculiar mix of awe and heaviness. The harpist struck a final note, as if sealing something unseen, her gaze steady but distant. Zarvi lingered, watching the interplay between the ink that glimmered on the page and the harp's melody that seemed to linger in the space between breaths. Beside her, Marin stood, his eyes fixed on the faint glow of the quill and the way the harp seemed to hum softly as it rested. They say ink tells the truth of its maker, Zarvi mused softly, her voice blending with the gentle murmur of the market. Marin's gaze flickered to her, questioning. And what do you think their crafts are telling us? Zarvi didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer to the poet and harpist's wagon stall, her anklets chiming faintly with each step. The harpist's fingers stilled on her strings, her eyes flicking briefly to Zarvi with a gaze that was both warm and unreadable before returning to the harp. The poet looked up, his eyes meeting Zarvi's with a calm, steady intensity. His hands were still for a moment, resting lightly on the parchment. Dreamers always carry their questions close. His voice was smooth, warm like the golden light of the lanterns around them. The harpist glanced up at him briefly, her fingers brushing the strings in a delicate motion that sent a single, lingering note into the air, as if punctuating his words. Her expression betrayed nothing, yet her presence added weight to the poet's, as though their crafts were inseparably bound. Zarvi didn't respond, only tilted her head slightly, her curiosity alive but guarded. The poet's quill moved again, the ink catching the light. Dreams are delicate, he murmured, his tone carrying an almost wistful note. They are stories we tell ourselves when the world grows quiet. And yet, even they can be rewritten. The harpist struck a gentle chord, her music softening the weight of his words, yet carrying an undercurrent of something unspoken. As the poet uttered these words, Zarvi's gaze flickered briefly to the faint shimmer of the quill. The glow, while subtle, seemed to carry a resonance that didn't feel entirely natural. The harpist's melody wavered briefly before steadying, as if sensing Zarvi's unease. Marin's hand brushed the edge of the table, his movements deliberate but casual. Zarvi could feel his thoughts mirroring her own. The poet's ink and the harpist's music. There was something in their union that felt too precise, too intentional. The poet looked up again, his expression calm yet mysterious. "Will you share a dream?" he asked, his voice lighter now, almost playful. The harpist's gaze flickered briefly to Zarvi, her hands resting lightly on the harp's frame, her stillness carrying the weight of quiet observation. Zarvi's fingers brushed the edge of the table, but she didn't sit. She felt the pull of his question, the subtle weight of his presence, and the harpist's melody, something faint that felt like it might unfurl into something more. "Perhaps another time," she said softly, her voice steady. The poet inclined his head, his hands moving once more to the quill. The harpist's fingers followed suit, coaxing the strings into a gentle refrain as the next villager approached. as Zarvi and Marin moved away. The poet and harpist's figures receded into the warm blur of the market. Yet their presence lingered, a ripple in the evening's harmony that Zarvi couldn't quite ignore. Zarvi and Marin hurried back to Ariel's stall. Ariel was seated cross-legged behind her table, tracing her fingers over a villager's palm. "Dreams carry threads of truth," she said, her tone weaving warmth into the winter air. "Even the smallest whisper holds a story, waiting to be heard. Go on to a journey now, and your dream will guide you." The villager left satisfied. Zarvi and Marin rushed their way into the stall. "The poet," Zarvi began, her voice thoughtful. "His ink, it glows, and the harpist, her music. It felt like it was more than just a melody." Ariel's expression grew thoughtful, and she gestured for them to sit, her movements unhurried. "Tell me what you've seen." And so they did, their words carrying the weight of the unease they'd felt. Ariel listened closely, her fingers brushing the edge of her table as if tracing the threads of their story. "Zarvi, you must understand, most things forbidden don't truly vanish. They sleep, and sometimes they wake." Ariel leaned forward, her voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. "Dream shifting was forbidden long ago. Its art was thought lost, but I see its echoes in what you've described. The totems fractured, the essence siphoned away. The dream poet may be more than what he seems." Zarvi's mind raced, the image of the dream poet, his calm presence, the ink that glimmered as it dried, his hands moving with such purpose, now laced with doubt. "He's a dream shifter. He is rewriting dreams," she murmured. "Not entirely," Ariel replied. "But he's taking fragments, memories, emotions, the threads that hold a dream together. The harpist's melodies make the dreamer vulnerable, open, and his quill, it draws out the essence, leaving the dream fractured and the dreamer unmoored." Marin stepped closer, his voice taut. "Why? What does he gain from this?" Ariel's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the sleeping star hung, its light a soft pulse against the darkness. "Some say the sleeping star holds the dreams of all who have ever lived. Others believe it is the source of the dream wind. To wake it would be to unbind the boundary between dreams and reality. For those who seek to reshape the world, it is the ultimate power." The words fell like stones into still water, rippling outward. Zarvi clenched her hands. "Then we can't let him wake it." Ariel's expression softened, though her eyes remained sharp. "Number. But you must tread carefully, Zarvi. The poet's power lies not just in what he takes, but in the dreams he carries. Confronting him directly would be like stepping into a storm. You would need a way to anchor yourself, to hold on to your own essence while standing against his." "And how do I do that?" Zarvi asked. Ariel reached for a small pouch at her side, drawing out a vial filled with shimmering dream dust. "We will weave a ward," she said, "but not just with thread. Your weaving, Marin's smithing, and my invocations will create a barrier strong enough to shield you, and perhaps to guide you into his dream." Zarvi blinked, her heart quickening. "Into his dream?" "It is the only way to break his connection to the dream winds," Ariel said. "You must sever the root, not just the branch." The enormity of the task loomed before Zarvi, but beneath the fear was a quiet resolve. She had spent her life weaving threads, binding fragments into something whole. Perhaps this was no different, only the stakes were higher. Marin placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice steady. "You won't do this alone. We'll make sure you're ready." Ariel nodded, her expression softening into something almost tender. You carry the heart of Supta in your hands, Zarvi. Remember that. And remember, dreams are never lost. They are only waiting to be found again. As the night deepened, the three of them began their preparations, their movements precise, their purpose clear. The market glimmered around them, its light a fragile, fleeting thing. Yet within that light, Zarvi felt the stirrings of something stronger, a resolve born not of fear, but of love, for her town, for its dreams, and for the winds that carried them. The sleeping star pulsed softly above, its light a reminder of all that was at stake. The air in the market shifted as the preparations unfolded. Beneath the lilting notes of the harpists' melodies, there was a tension that only a few could sense. Ariel's wagon became their haven, a quiet space where threads, metal, and ancient words were woven into something stronger than any of them alone. Marin worked with focused precision, infusing a new totem with his smith whisper that would anchor Zarvi as she ventured into the poet's realm. Its surface gleamed faintly, etched with delicate symbols, a blend of his craft and Ariel's ancient markings. Ariel infused the totem with dream dust and a whispered invocation, her voice carrying the cadence of old winds and forgotten songs. Zarvi wove threads of moonbell essence with fragments of her own dreams. The threads shimmered with a quiet light, their pattern forming a tapestry unlike anything she had created before. It was not just a ward, but a bridge, a path that would guide her into the depths of the poet's fractured dreams. As the final thread fell into place, Ariel stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Zarvi's shoulder. "This will carry you," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "But remember, the poet's dream is not yours. You must hold on to yourself, your essence, even when the winds pull at you." Zarvi met her gaze, the weight of Ariel's words settling over her like a mantle. "I'll remember," she said quietly. The harpist's melodies filled the market, their notes weaving through the air like tendrils of mist. Zarvi and Marin stood at the edge of the square, their gazes fixed on the dream poet's stall. He sat there, his quill moving in fluid strokes across parchment, the ink glinting faintly in the lantern light. Ariel approached them, her presence a quiet strength. "The harpist's music is the key," she said. "It opens the path to the dream realm. You will need to let the melody guide you." Zarvi nodded, clutching the totem and tapestry close. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, her anklets anchored her to the snow-dusted ground. The music swirled around her, soft and hypnotic, drawing her into its depths. She felt the world shift, the edges of reality blurring like the edge of a dream. The harpist's gaze met hers for a brief moment, an unspoken plea flickering in her eyes. Zarvi felt it, the weight of complicity and guilt, but there was no time to linger. The melody grew stronger, pulling her forward, into the poet's domain. The dream realm opened before Zarvi like a shimmering veil torn from the night sky, its fabric alive with shifting hues and restless murmurs. Shapes coalesced and faded, their edges blurring as though the realm could not decide what it wished to be. Each step Zarvi took sent ripples through the luminous ground, the space around her trembling with a fragile, ethereal rhythm. At the heart of this fractured expanse stood the dream poet. His figure was sharper here, outlined by a dark light that seemed to hunger for the dream winds swirling chaotically around him. The quill in his hand moved with mechanical grace, sketching arcs of shadow that twisted the air into jagged patterns. Hovering nearby was the harpist, her hands ghosting over the strings of an instrument that seemed woven from moonlight and despair. Each note she struck carried a dissonance that gnawed at the dream's fragile harmony. "You tread where you do not belong," the poet said, his voice low and weighted with command. "This place is mine, built from fragments cast aside and forgotten." Zarvi steadied herself, the totem in her hand glowing faintly as if bolstered by her resolve. "No dream belongs to you," she replied, her voice carrying a steadiness that belied the unease rising within her. "What you've stolen doesn't make you a creator. It makes you a thief." The poet turned toward her fully, his eyes fathomless pits of unspoken grief and ambition. "A thief takes for himself. I gather what was already lost to give it purpose, to mend what the dream winds have left in ruins. And yet you leave ruin in your wake," Zarvi said, stepping closer. The dream threads she carried unfurled slightly, their silvery light catching the edges of the fractured shards floating around her. Dreams are meant to guide, not to be wielded like weapons. The poet's expression darkened, and the quill in his hand flared with an unearthly light. "You understand nothing of what I seek." But before Zarvi could respond, the harpist's melody shifted, growing sharper, heavier. The notes wove through the air like a net of thorns, each one pulling at Zarvi's resolve. The dream around her pulsed, the colors bleeding into shadows, and she felt the ground beneath her feet give way, her anklets chiming, shimmering, trying hard to hold her to this realm. But the fall was not a fall in the waking sense. Zarvi was pulled deeper into the dream, the fragments around her spiraling like a storm of forgotten memories. She tumbled through colors and shapes, her senses overwhelmed by the weight of the poet's stolen dreams. When she landed, the world had changed. The landscape was stark and barren, painted in hues of ashen gray and pale gold. In the distance loomed the sleeping star, its light dim and flickering, as though it hesitated to fully shine. The harpist was there, her back to Zarvi, her hands poised over the harp strings. The instrument seemed alive, its strings trembling with a rhythm that mirrored Zarvi's quickening pulse. Zarvi rose slowly, her legs unsteady, and reached for her totem. Its warmth steadied her, and the threads she had woven began to glow faintly. Her anklets chimed softly as she stepped forward, their resonance blending with the trembling strings of the harp. The sound was more than melody now. It was an invocation, a whisper from the dream winds that urged her onward. "You don't have to play his song," Zarvi said, her voice gentle but insistent. "You're more than this." The harpist stiffened but did not turn. Her fingers hovered over the strings as though bound by invisible chains. The notes that escaped were discordant, sharp edges slicing through the stillness of the dreamscape. "I owe him a debt," she whispered, her tone brittle and frayed. "This song is my burden to bear." Zarvi moved closer, her tapestry unfurling in her hands, its threads shimmering like captured starlight. "A debt born of fear is no debt at all," she said. "You are not his to command." The harpist's fingers brushed the strings again, and this time the melody struck Zarvi like a gust of icy wind. She staggered, her anklets flaring with light as though anchoring her to the dream's fragile ground. The totem in her hand pulsed, its glow steadying her resolve. The harpist turned her head slightly, her eyes glinting with both defiance and despair. "You don't understand," the harpist murmured, her voice laced with pain. "The song is not mine anymore. He took it, like he takes everything." Zarvi paused, the words striking deeper than the melody. Her fingers tightened around the totem. its light surging in response to her determination. "Then let us take it back," she said softly but firmly. The harpist hesitated, her fingers trembling over the strings. Zarvi's tapestry began to weave itself, the threads stretching toward the harp, their light entwining with the shadows that clung to its frame. The dissonance in the melody faltered, a single note ringing clear amid the chaos. The harpist's shoulders slumped, her hands falling to her sides as though the strings had rejected her touch. "He binds me with my own fears," she said, her voice cracking. "I play because I am afraid of the silence." Zarvi took another step forward, her anklets chiming like a soft prayer. "Fear has no place here," she said. "The silence is not your enemy. It is where your true song lies, waiting to be heard." The harpist's gaze met Zarvi's fully for the first time, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "What if I cannot find it?" Zarvi extended her totem, its light bridging the space between them. "Then let me hold the silence with you," she said, "and together we will fill it with what was always yours." The harpist reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing the totem. The moment she touched it, the threads of Zarvi's tapestry surged forward, wrapping around the harp with a brilliance that shattered the lingering shadows. The strings, once trembling with despair, now thrummed with a warmth that echoed the first notes of a new melody. The harpist gasped, her hands hovering over the strings as though afraid to touch them. It's mine again," she whispered. Outside the Dream, in the snow-draped market square, Zarvi's body trembled, her breath shallow and rapid. Ariel knelt beside her, her hands resting lightly on Zarvi's shoulders, her voice steady as she whispered ancient invocations. Around them, Marin stood guard, holding a glowing totem that pulsed with his own steady energy. "She's close and holding," Ariel murmured, her silver hair gleaming faintly in the lamplight. "But the poet's grasp is strong." Marin's grip on the totem tightened. "What can we do?" Ariel reached into her pouch, drawing out a vial of dream dust. "Her anklets will keep her tied to herself, and we anchor her to us with this dream dust," she said simply. She scattered the dust around Zarvi, its golden shimmer forming a circle that glowed faintly. "And we trust her strength." Back in the Dream, the harpist stood beside Zarvi, her hand steady on the harp as a new melody began to flow. It was gentle but unyielding, a song that pushed back against the fractured shards that swirled in the distance. The dreamscape trembled, the sleeping stars' dim light growing steadier. But the poet's fury erupted like a storm. His figure loomed larger, the quill in his hand blazing with a dark intensity. The fractured shards of stolen dreams gathered around him, their jagged edges forming a shield. "You think this changes anything?" he spat, his voice reverberating like thunder. "You cannot undo what has been written." Zarvi stepped forward, her tapestry glowing with the light of the harpist's reclaimed melody. "Dreams are not yours to rewrite," she said, her voice steady and strong. She raised her totem, its light meeting the shadows around the poet. "They belong to those who lived them." The poet lunged, his quill slicing through the air with the precision of a blade. Zarvi's tapestry flared in response, its threads catching the quill's edge and binding it in a web of light. The harpist's music surged, its notes weaving through the tapestry, amplifying its strength. With a final surge, Zarvi cast her tapestry fully, its threads wrapping around the poet and binding him in a cocoon of shimmering light. His movements stilled, the quill falling from his hand, its glow extinguished. The dream dissolved slowly, its fractured shards melting into streams of light that spiraled toward the sleeping star. Zarvi felt the pull of waking, the world around her shifting from the ethereal to the familiar. But before she returned fully, she saw the poet, diminished and kneeling in the fading dreamscape, his face shadowed by something deeper than defeat. "You sought to rewrite what cannot be changed," she said softly, her voice carrying a thread of both compassion and finality. "The dream winds cannot be bent to one will. They flow as they must." The poet's gaze lifted to hers, his eyes burning with fury. The dream was already receding, the luminous fabric of it unraveling as the sleeping star's light grew brighter. The harpist stood beside her, her presence steady now, her hands clasped over the harp's quiet strings. She nodded to Zarvi, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had forged. When Zarvi opened her eyes, the world of Supta came rushing back, the crisp bite of winter air, the market's fading energy, and the glow of lantern light dancing on snow. Her body felt heavy, her breath shallow, as though she had carried the weight of the dream back with her. Ariel stood nearby, her expression calm but unyielding. Ariel stepped forward, her gaze steady as she addressed the poet. "You are no longer bound to the dream winds," she said. "The wanderers will decide your fate," she said. "Your path is no longer for us to guide." Marin stood nearby, his gaze fixed on Zarvi, the totem still glowing faintly in his hands. "You held," he said, his relief evident in his voice. "We felt it. The light shifted." Zarvi closed her eyes, the soft chime of her anklets blending with the quiet symphony of Supta at night, as the first flakes of snow began to fall again. Dreams whispered through the winds, carrying with them the essence of a miracle, fragile yet enduring, like the light of the sleeping star. As the dream wanderers prepared to leave Supta, their wagons glittered under the light of the sleeping star. Zarvi stood with Marin, their totems glowing softly in their hands. The harpist paused before Zarvi, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "You've given me back my song," she said simply. Zarvi nodded. "And now you can write it anew." Ariel stepped forward, her smile soft but radiant, her silver hair catching the faint light of the lanterns. She placed her hands lightly on Zarvi's shoulders, her touch warm as the memory of summer winds. "The sleeping star burns brighter tonight," she said, her gaze lifting briefly toward the heavens. Her expression grew tender, a rare stillness settling over her playful demeanor. "Take care of your heart, Zarvi," she said. "Dreams are stirring again, my dear. But don't get too comfortable." Her eyes twinkled with a familiar mischief as she added, "Dreams have a way of calling us when we least expect it." Zarvi smiled, her breath curling in the frosty air. "And if they call too loudly?" "Then you know where to find me," Ariel replied, her voice lilting, a melody all its own. "I'm always where the winds whisper secrets, and where the tea is good. Come to me when you need answers." She laughed softly, a sound as warm as her presence, before stepping back. Zarvi nodded, her chest tightening with a bittersweet ache. "I'll hold you to that," she said, her voice quieter now. Ariel winked, a gesture as light as snowfall. "I'd expect nothing less. I shall get going. I've got a caravan to chase before they leave me behind." And with that, she turned, her lavender shawl trailing like a wisp of cloud as she strode toward the waiting wagons. She paused only once, glancing back with a grin that carried the weight of old secrets and endless possibilities. Then she was gone, her figure blending into the colorful tapestry of the Dream Wanderers' departure, as the Wanderers' wagons disappeared into the snowy horizon. The sleeping star pulsed softly above, its light a quiet promise of dreams restored. Zarvi stood with Marin beneath the boughs of a frost-laden tree. Around her, the village began to hum with life once more. The villagers, unaware of the battle waged in their name, seemed lighter, their steps less burdened. Zarvi glanced at Marin, her breath clouding the crisp air. "Do you think they'll remember?" she asked softly. Marin smiled, his gaze warm. "They don't need to," he said. "The dreams will remember for them." And in the heart of Supta, beneath the snow-laden trees and the glow of lanterns, the villagers found themselves dreaming once again. Rest now, dear dreamer, and let the light of the sleeping star watch over you. Its glow is soft yet endless, a quiet reminder that dreams are never truly lost. They wait, nestled in the folds of time, to rise anew with each dawn. Close your eyes and feel the gentle warmth of Supta, where courage took root and the dreamer's song found its way back to the stars. The wanderers' caravan has departed, their stories carried onward, but the star's light remains, a beacon for all who dare to dream. Sleep softly now, beneath a sky that holds your every wish, and know that wherever your path leads, the light of the sleeping star will always guide you home. Good night, dreamer, until your dreams